settled, Prince Andrew faces a potential police investigation as the Metropolitan Police are looking into claims that the prince pressured a bodyguard.
5 minutes ago, Prince Andrew was caught leaving the United Kingdom quietly under the cover of rain. That's how the breaking news opened across British television screens at exactly 7 p.m. on the 20th of October, 2025. The headline scrolled beneath the image of a private jet idling on the tarmac at London City Airport, its lights blinking through the mist, and there, caught in a grainy telephoto frame, was a familiar silhouette, shoulders hunched, collar turned up. No insignia, no escort, only a single suitcase and the heavy weight of disgrace. Just days earlier, Andrew had renounced the use of his Duke of York title in a royal statement that stunned the nation. The ink on that declaration was barely dry when he was seen boarding a discreet charter flight bound for southern France, the country where he was said to be seeking refuge. For many, this was no mere relocation. It was an escape. But what made the moment explosive wasn't the flight itself. It was what happened across the Atlantic just hours earlier in a televised interview watched by millions. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, broke years of silence. Her words were calm, measured yet devastating. He may have fallen, but not for the reasons you think. Within minutes, social media erupted. The hashtag #FergieBombshell trended worldwide. Was she defending him or revealing something darker inside Buckingham Palace? Aides were scrambling to contain the fallout. One palace insider whispered to the press her interview wasn't cleared, and now he's gone outside the airport gates. The wind howled as the plane ascended into the night sky, carrying not just a fallen prince, but a mystery that could reignite the scandal the monarchy thought it had buried forever. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear next may explain why this flight wasn't just an escape, but the beginning of a confession. The choice to depart England wasn't made instantly. For months, Prince Andrew had been existing like a phantom inside Royal Lodge, his previously dignified property, transformed into a citadel of stillness, drapes pulled, barriers secured. Only a minimal staff remained to his residence in Windsor Great Park. He was barely more than a silhouette observed through fog, a figure occupying his own heritage. After the forfeiture of his Duke of York designation, the pressure inside the lodge became intolerable. Communications from reporters never ceased. Previous companions from his military years discreetly separated themselves. Even the palace, for all its tradition of privacy, made it apparent the family had progressed. What persisted was an implicit acknowledgment. Andrew's existence was an exposed injury the monarchy could no longer hide in private. King Charles had attempted to provide a gentle resolution. He organized for an inconspicuous protection group, a modest stipend, and an acknowledgement that his sibling would pursue tranquility overseas to prevent additional disgrace. The narrative of wellness and recuperation in Europe was disclosed to the press as a courteous facade, but confidence recognized it was expulsion, masked as withdrawal behind the scenes. Sarah Ferguson had been his sole link to the external realm. Despite years of division, she attended frequently, occasionally delivering meals, occasionally aged photographs from their daughters' ceremonies. Those attendances became anchors. It was Fergie who initially proposed that he abandon the country completely, not as an banishment, but as a sanctuary, allow the chaos diminish. She informed him one afternoon, "You can't battle phantoms." Andrew, by mid-October, preparations were discreetly progressing. His identification renewed under a confidential designation, his possessions gathered with the assistance of a solitary aide, the location Antibes, France, where an aged companion had presented him a coastal residence. But what nobody recognized, not the king, not William, not even his daughters, was that Sarah had already consented to materialize on American television. What commenced as a lifestyle conversation had transformed into something far more hazardous. Because when Fergie occupied that studio seat, she wasn't just protecting a collapsed prince. She was igniting a catalyst that would pursue him across the waterway and into the center of a controversy reborn. It was intended to be a tender dialogue, a comfortable daytime conversation with Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, addressing charity endeavors and existence after the palace. The studio illumination were gentle, the presenter grinning, the atmosphere sentimental. But as millions of spectators would soon comprehend, this was not just another royal discussion. It was a revelation camouflaged as casual conversation. The conversation broadcast live on the 20th of October, 2025, from a New York television facility across the ocean. Britain was concluding for the evening, oblivious that a solitary statement was about to spark a new royal catastrophe. The presenter inclined forward, her voice cautious but inquisitive. "Sarah, it's been a challenging few years for your family. For Prince Andrew particularly. How is he managing?" After withdrawing from public existence, Fergie hesitated. She grinned, not the wide expression she used to display in her tabloid days, but a weary, understanding expression. "He's managing," she stated quietly. "He's wounded, naturally, but what individuals overlook is that anguish and culpability aren't always the identical thing." The presenter reacted, "Are you suggesting he's blameless?" Sarah wavered, her digits tracing the rim of her container of water. Then, with a composure that seemed almost practiced, she responded, "I'm suggesting that not every reality has been revealed. Some were concealed, not to shield him, but to shield others." There it was 8 phrases that halted the space frigid within moments. Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube detonated. Number Fergie, admission, number Andrew, reality, and number royal concealment began circulating in over 20 nations. Segments of the instant went popular before the broadcast even concluded. American networks replayed the statement with theatrical music. British presenters summoned emergency discussions at Buckingham Palace. Assistants were already addressing frantic communications from journalists. One senior representative informed the BBC anonymously, "That phrase was not authorized by us." The palace had no awareness of what she planned to state by midnight in London. The conversation had been replayed over 100 occasions. CNN designated it the Duchess's admission. The New York Times published the headline, "Fergie proposes palace concealed the reality about Prince Andrew in Windsor." Where the intelligence emerged at sunrise, Beatrice contacted her mother in distress. "Mum, what have you accomplished?" Sarah simply responded, "What I should have accomplished years ago, informed the world he's not the sole one who should respond." For many older spectators, the instant was peculiarly emotional. After decades of quietude from the royals, here was someone ultimately communicating like a human individual, imperfect, terrified, and passionately devoted. Some termed it courage, others carelessness. But everyone concurred on one thing. It was the initial occasion in years. The royal controversy seemed authentic again. Across America, morning programs argued her intentions. Was she attempting to shield her former spouse or incriminate the establishment that had rejected its support on him? One analyst on Good Morning America stated it optimally: "You can't express a partial reality in a palace because it resonates stronger than a deception." Meanwhile, in France, Andrew occupied in the tranquility of a leased villa overlooking the Mediterranean. His device buzzed continuously, communications overwhelming in from companions, reporters, and even his daughters. He didn't respond any of them. He simply observed the ocean blue, boundless and detached, the identical way the world now observed him still. The influence of Fergie's phrases couldn't be restrained. Speculation increased. Who were the others she was mentioning? Was she discussing about Epstein's collaborators or suggesting at identities nearer to the throne? Royal confidants murmured that the king himself had requested a complete recording before daybreak, and yet there was one undeniable reality. Sarah's statement had accomplished what no tribunal or controversy could accomplish. It made individuals challenge the official narrative. For the initial occasion, understanding for Andrew commenced to emerge among spectators who had previously detested him. They perceived not just a dishonored royal, but a figure entangled in something larger, darker, and still developing. Now I'd like to inquire you, what do you believe she intended when she stated some realities were concealed to shield others? Was it a caution to the palace or a frantic act of devotion? And where are you observing from London, Chicago, Melbourne, or somewhere else around the world? Because one thing is definite, that solitary statement had already transformed the currents of public sentiment. And as the sun emerged over the Mediterranean, the world's focus approached toward one inquiry: would the figure who disappeared from Britain stay quiet, or would he ultimately respond? The morning after Sarah Ferguson's broadcast admission, Buckingham Palace was no longer a refuge. It was a command facility. Devices resonated persistently, assistants rushed through the passages transporting containers designated urgent, and every major intelligence channel in the world had a journalist stationed outside the decorated barriers. The royal family had endured countless controversies before, but this one was different. It was intimate, unpredictable, and originating from inside the barriers they had always regulated at Clarence House. King Charles III assembled an emergency gathering. Meeting just after sunrise, the space was dimly illuminated, the environment grim. Prince William occupied beside him, his expression rigid, while Princess Anne inhabited the distant section, examining through a substantial briefing container filled with excerpts from American media. Camilla wasn't present. The king had requested her to persist at Balmoral for privacy. It was, in reality, an endeavor to maintain her distant from what might become another detonation. Charles initiated the gathering without formality. "We have a predicament," he stated simply, his voice transported the exhaustion of a figure who'd invested his existence purifying after his family's errors. Sarah's conversation has reignited everything. Every network is replaying her phrases, and speculation is operating widespread. William inclined forward. "They're terming it a concealment, Father. If we disregard it, it appears like culpability. If we react, it maintains the narrative active." Anne interjected, her tone efficient and sharp. "The predicament isn't the press, it's Sarah. She's provided them blood in the liquid. The sole approach to deprive the predators is to eliminate the fragrance. We must separate the crown immediately." Charles massaged his temples, his expression weary. "We've separated ourselves from Andrew for years. What more can we accomplish? Eliminate him of oxygen." "He's already departed." "Departed," Anne stated, incredulous. "He's in France, existing under your stipend, shielded by your identity, and now his former wife is suggesting that someone else, perhaps someone in this space, buried testimony." Silence. It was an indictment. It was terror. William fractured it. "We can't regulate Fergie, but we can regulate the account. We need a reaction brief, dignified and ultimate, something that states the monarchy is concentrated on its obligation, not speculation." The king acknowledged slowly, and Andrew William wavered. If he communicates now, even in protection, it will appear coordinated. He must persist quiet. But the quietude was already fracturing elsewhere in New York. The conversation replayed for the third occasion on major networks. American presenters were now connecting Sarah's phrases to Virginia Giuffre's memoir, scheduled for distribution later that year. Was the Duchess suggesting at the contents of the approaching publication? One analyst inquired, or something the palace anticipated would never materialize to illumination. Back in London, the communications group constructed a three-statement declaration for distribution under the royal emblem. The observations made by Sarah, Duchess of York, were individual and do not represent the stance of the royal family. The palace will not be remarking further on confidential family circumstances. The phrasing was intentional, frigid, detached, separating. But even before it reached the press, it was too delayed. The destruction had already circulated through digital channels faster than any official rejection could cauterize. Anne emerged from her seat. "This isn't just a media narrative anymore. This is about regulation. If Andrew determines to respond, he'll transport us all down with him." Charles glanced up, his eyes dark. "And if he doesn't, then Fergie will," Anne responded. "She's always been the unpredictable one." At that identical hour on the Côte d'Azur, Andrew occupied in the living space of his coastal residence. The French morning illumination spilled through the apertures, illuminating particle fragments in the atmosphere. A British newspaper rested on the surface, its headlines shouting, "Fergie suggests at Royal Mysteries." Is Andrew the solution? His aide, an inconspicuous former serviceman, stood at the entrance, "Your Royal High." He halted himself mid-statement, "Sir, London's requesting for a declaration." Andrew didn't glance up. "There's nothing to state, sir. The palace has released a reaction, separating themselves from the Duchess. I anticipated that," Andrew interrupted, observing out at the ocean. "They always do." The aide wavered. "Shall I terminate the conversation requests?" Andrew acknowledged all of them for now, but deep down he recognized quietude would not rescue him. This occasion, Fergie's phrases had transformed him from a forgotten exile into a representation of privacy, of culpability, of reality, unexpressed and representations could not conceal. Back in London, the king occupied alone after the gathering, observing at the artwork of his mother above the mantelpiece. For all her composure and discipline, even Queen Elizabeth II had not escaped the turbulences her family generated. He murmured, "We attempted to modernize it, Mummy, but it maintains fracturing outside the palace barriers." Journalists summoned out inquiries as the royal vehicles departed. Will the king react to Sarah Ferguson's assertions? Is Prince Andrew returning to London? The responses were overwhelmed by the precipitation, and as night descended over England, the monarchy once again stood on the boundary of another confrontation. Because this occasion, the controversy hadn't originated from deception or speculation, it had originated from reality half-communicated. Ngehne, anticipating for the one figure who recognized the remainder to ultimately communicate. By the evening of the 20th of October, 2025, the British media had entered into frenzy. Helicopters circulated over Windsor, journalists stationed outside the barriers of Royal Lodge, and royal analysts on every network were theorizing about one inquiry: where is Prince Andrew? At precisely 6:43 p.m., that inquiry was resolved. A confidential black Range Rover departed quietly through a lateral barrier, its apertures shaded, its registrations registered to a confidential protection company. Inside occupied Prince Andrew, his face gaunt in the faint illumination of the vehicle's interior. His eyes concentrated on the path ahead. No procession, no protectors, no departure gesture, only a solitary aide in the forward position, grasping a narrow leather container designated with diplomatic crimson binding. The journey to London City Airport consumed just under an hour. Precipitation coated the landing strip, and a frigid breeze swept through the terminal as Andrew's vehicle arrived near an inconspicuous facility used for government leases. Waiting there was a compact Dassault Falcon aircraft. Its motors already vibrating, a French aviator stood at the base of the stairway, conversing quietly with terminal personnel. It was all meticulously organized, and yet the appearance of privacy demolished almost immediately. A photographer from a foreign intelligence organization, tipped off by a disclosure inside the terminal, documented the instant Andrew emerged out of the vehicle. He displayed an extended navy garment collar, elevated and transported a solitary briefcase. The photograph, slightly obscured, was sufficient. By the occasion the aircraft's tires departed the landing strip, the world already recognized Prince Andrew had departed the United Kingdom across social platforms. Hashtags detonated. Number Andrew departs UK. Number royal banishment. Number the collapsed prince. Newsrooms scrambled to verify specifications. The journey strategy registered under a pseudonym indicated Nice, France as its location within minutes. BBC News verified it. Prince Andrew exits the UK amid increasing controversy following Sarah Ferguson's broadcast observations inside the aircraft. The compartment was quiet. Andrew occupied alone, observing through the compact circular aperture at the shadowy formations outside. The vibration of the motors overwhelmed out his reflections, but not his recollections. He reflected of the Falklands, the decorations that no longer signified anything, the conversations, the ridicule, and now this, a quiet exit from the nation that had once acknowledged to him on the surface. The palace released another brief declaration. The Duke of York has undertaken confidential movement overseas. The royal family has no additional remark, but few accepted it was confidential. To the public, it appeared like banishment, or worse, evasion. By 9:20 p.m., the aircraft contacted down on the Côte d'Azur, welcomed not by photographers, but by the gentle Mediterranean precipitation. Anticipating on the landing strip was a shadowy Mercedes and two figures in attire regional protection, contracted by an aged companion of the prince. They transported him to a residence outside Antibes, concealed behind alabaster stone barriers and blooming olive vegetation. The press would subsequently term it the residence of quietude. Meanwhile, in London, Fergie's conversation continued to command global headlines. Discussion shows analysed every segment. Expression readers examined her reactions, and analysts argued what she had signified by concealed realities. One American presenter inquired directly, did Sarah Ferguson just admit that the palace suppressed testimony to rescue its perception inside the palace's press division? Assistants argued whether to release a legal caution or persist quiet. Anything we state will intensify it. One stated, then state nothing. Another responded, let the chaos consume itself out. But even as they communicated, the Daily Mail was organizing its front section. Exiled Prince Andrew escapes Britain after Fergie's revelation conversation across Britain. Reactions were separated. Some spectators perceived a fractured figure, ultimately accepting his destiny. Others perceived a coward preventing accountability. He should have confronted it here, not escape away, stated one caller on BBC Radio. Two, but a veteran from Andrew's naval division, informed journalists he was a competent commander once. I believe he just couldn't endure the disgrace anymore. At Balmoral, King Charles examined the headlines in quietude. He's departed. Then he whispered to an aide, perhaps it's for the optimal, but Princess Anne disagreed. Number. She stated quietly, it's never for the optimal. When one of us escapes, it just signifies the reality is still pursuing. In France, Andrew extracted his luggage, a few garments, documents, and an aged photograph of him with his daughters as children outside. The precipitation had ceased, and the currents crashed gently again. Against the coastline, he stood at the aperture, the ocean extending endlessly before him for the initial occasion in months. There were no protectors, no press, no illuminating cameras, just quietude. And yet, even as he released, the sound of his device vibrating fractured the tranquility. It was a communication from Sarah. They recognize you're departed, but I stated what required to be stated. Andrew sealed his eyes, his image flickering in the aperture panel somewhere behind him. Back in England, the turbulence was only commencing in the days that pursued his quiet appearance on the Côte d'Azur Prince. Andrew all but disappeared. There were no photographs, no declarations, no observations. The once boisterous Duke of York had become a silhouette amid the Mediterranean illumination, a figure eliminated not by banishment, but by depletion. He leased a modest residence in Antibes, positioned behind elevated limestone barriers overlooking the ocean. The establishment was under a companion's identity, its agreement organized inconspicuously through mediators. Residents observed the British registration markers, but few comprehended who the occupant was. Only the protection group positioned at the barrier revealed a way that something about this residence was different inside the days proceeded in gradual repetition. Andrew examined newspapers transmitted late to prevent focus. Every headline still transported his identity: Royal Escapee, the Duke in Dishonor, Fergie's Mystery. But it was one article in the Le Monde that affected him most. It characterized him not as the antagonist nor a casualty, but as the representation of a monarchy battling its own phantoms. He invested extended hours occupying on the patio, observing sailboats drift lazily across the liquid. He reflected of his daughters, of Charles, of the existence he had forfeited, and of the reality Sarah had ventured to contact in her solitary statement on television. She had reopened every entrance the palace had secured, whether she intended to or not. She had made him applicable again, and he wasn't certain if that was a benefit or a damnation. Back in London, the consequences intensified. American networks theorized that Andrew's documents, those speculated papers Sarah suggested at, might encompass elevated profile figures connected to Epstein's community. The palace declined to remark, releasing a rigid caution to acknowledge the privacy of all participants. But behind sealed entrances, King Charles was enraged. She's manipulating with combustion, he informed an aide, and she's igniting it with our identity. Princess Anne, consistently the realist, advised, tranquility, it will diminish. She stated, controversies always do, but the quietude must persist in France. However, quietude had a resonance. It was the resonating of Andrew's device at peculiar hours, reporters pretending to be aged companions, legal delegates presenting crisis assistance, and once a communication from an unidentified number that departed him observing at the display. Extended after it concluded, the voice had simply stated, "You still possess it, don't you?" He disconnected, his heart accelerating. He didn't recognize if it was a deception or a caution, but he proceeded to the vault concealed behind an artwork in the chamber and contacted the steel entrance inside where aged correspondences, individual notations, and yes, documents. Nothing explosive, perhaps, but sufficient to make influential individuals uncomfortable if they ever perceived daylight that night. As he occupied by the aperture, thunder resonated far out over the Mediterranean. He experienced the significance of it in his skeleton, not the turbulence outside, but the one accumulating beyond his regulation, and as lightning illuminated across the boundary, one reflection resonated in his consciousness. Sarah had communicated once. She might communicate again. For Andrew, banishment had presented tranquility for an instant, but in the separation, the current was transforming, and it was delivering the past back to coastline. By late October 2025, the narrative of Prince Andrew's escape to France had commenced to forfeit its position on the front sections. The world had already progressed onto another royal headline, the subsequent controversy, the subsequent address, the subsequent distraction. But for those who compensated focus, the quietude surrounding Andrew's disappearance wasn't the conclusion of a chapter. It was a representation of something larger, something uncomfortably human, the expense of arrogance and the gradual deterioration of privilege inside the quiet residence in Antibes. Andrew had established into a pattern that was neither punishment nor tranquility. Each morning he proceeded along the rocky coastline with no procession, no designations, and no crown emblem stitched into his garments. A figure who once commanded vessels now anticipated in sequence for his morning beverage at a compact establishment where nobody addressed him as Your Royal Highness, and for the initial occasion in decades, he commenced to experience what ordinary individuals termed freedom, a phrase he had once mistaken for luxury. But freedom, as he discovered, transported its own configuration of assessment he couldn't. Navigate through the intelligence without perceiving resonances of his own decline. The younger royals prospering, William and Catherine praised as the monarchy's future, and Charles's perception of transformation seemingly restored. The very family that wants to discover him now existed perfectly well without him. One evening, as the illumination descended below the boundary, Sarah Ferguson contacted. Her voice was steady but colored with culpability. "You're enraged with me," she stated. "I'm depleted." Andrew responded, "You opened an entrance and now I'm the one positioned in it." "I opened it," she stated, "because I was depleted of pretending that quietude equals legitimacy. They'll never absolve me for communicating, but at least I can slumber at night for an extended instant." Neither communicated. Then Andrew released. Maybe this is how restoration commences, by allowing individuals accept what they require to in that phrase. Perhaps unknowingly, he disclosed the quiet reality that operates through every royal controversy. Standing is never about realities. It's about who regulates the narrative. When the world ceases listening. As days transformed into weeks, the cameras outside the palace disappeared. The controversy diminished into an annotation, and the figure once recognized as the Duke of York became a phantom in his own history. But for those observing closely, the older generation who remembered the young naval commander, the Queen's favorite son, there was something undeniably catastrophic about it all. Because what destroyed Andrew wasn't only indictment or banishment. It was arrogance, the variety that convinces influential figures that the regulations don't pertain to them until the world demonstrates otherwise. And yet, within that catastrophe lies the most human instruction of all. No matter how elevated an individual stands, whether in a palace, a boardroom, or on a throne, character will always matter more than circumstance. Position diminishes, designations disintegrate, but integrity, once forfeited, departs an indication that duration can't eliminate. Perhaps in his own quiet banishment, Andrew learned what the royal emblem never could instruct, that modesty isn't a punishment, but the sole variety of distinction that persists for those of us observing from distant. It's a reminder that even the grandest existences can become cautionary narratives, that every controversy, however decorated, transports a representation of our own selections. How we confront failure, absolution, and the expense of reality. And as the currents resonated against the coastline that night, the figure once termed His Royal Highness stood barefoot in the sand, observing the current eliminate his footsteps for the initial occasion. He didn't oppose. Maybe that was his admission, not in phrases, but in capitulation. So what do you believe was Sarah Ferguson's disclosure, a frantic act of devotion, or the initial spark of reality that the monarchy couldn't restrain? Share your reflections in the remarks below and inform us where you're observing from London, Toronto, Los Angeles, or Sydney. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to appreciate, remark, and subscribe for more royal catastrophes, concealed histories, and influential instructions from behind the palace barriers. Because in the conclusion, even the mightiest crowns can fracture, but the narratives they depart behind never diminish. You,